Hi, this is Ryan at xcannabis.com. I'm talking about economics and U.S. job market and offshore banking, as well as offshore jobs, outsourcing jobs to other countries. We've seen a lot of this happen in the last century. A lot of what is now has taken place over a great deal of time through first handing the Federal Reserve to the private banking industry in 1913. Then, the heavy taxes that we saw that burdened the rich and the poor in 1944 when it hit its peak, and steadily increasing from 1931 when taxes were very low, at their all-time low, when the lowest tax bracket paid 1.5% and the highest tax bracket ever paid 25%. But then in 1944, under Harry Truman, taxes went from being 1.5% for the poor to 23% of their income, and then for the ultra rich, the top bracket, to be paying 94% on their income. That's crazy. That gives no incentive to really work hard if it's all going to the government. After going through such a growth period in our country when taxes were very low, then to get a stunted growth, the only thing that really saved us after those taxes increased was the war. The war took place, and of course that boosted the economy. But the Federal Reserve at that point, could manipulate the money and the statistics and make it look as if though we were getting more growth and more gain than we actually were. But then we saw a steady decrease, and then we started seeing them restraining on the taxes a bit more. 1964 they started going down under Lyndon B. Johnson, and it kind of varied a little bit. It increased a little under Reagan. People think that Reagan decreased taxes for the rich. He actually increased them for the rich, and he also created a lot of jobs with boosting the economy with small business loans, which is one of my favorite things about President Reagan. Making small business able to compete with bigger business. Now, I don't always believe in socialism, but when it comes to the safety of our nation and maintaining the ability to function and the infrastructure of our country, it's good to see a wide variety of businesses out there competing. I don't believe in, the racial discrimination is horrible. I don't believe in that. That's one reason why I don't believe in affirmative action. I don't believe race should be a consideration. I don't think it should exclude anybody because they're a certain race, whether they're black, white, yellow, or purple, and that's kind of why I don't believe in affirmative action and job quotas and things that benefit small businesses of one creed or another. I mean, I think liberty should be colorless, should be totally colorblind. That's just my opinion, but I think Reagan did a lot of good things, but we see that under higher taxes when they went up in the late Clinton, early Bush era, or I guess that's vice versa. I'm talking about George H. Bush. When the taxes started going up more and more, we started seeing people lobbying, rich people lobbying for the NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement. Later on, we'd see SAFTA come about, and so on and so forth. These were both Republican and Democrats. They're both, good guy, bad guy on the same team type of thing. But they both played their part in this. And when the taxes started going up, and they after 100 years of seeing our economy shaped like it has, going from taxes of as low as 1.5% to taxes of as high as 94%. I mean, business people and people of estates and wealth see that kind of instability, and they don't want to be caught in something, be stuck in something that is that fluctuating, where it's scary if they might lose their assets on a capital gains tax, and then transferring their assets to a new country, getting dual citizenship, like they used to play that game of offshore banking, dual citizenship, things like that. That is when a lot of people just started kind of backing away from the United States. And so over the last 20 years, we've saw 3.7 million jobs leave the United States. Where I think that the businesses, had they have if they had some stability, these corporations and mega rich people and so on and so forth, if they could depend on something, even if the tax rate was 30%, and it wasn't going to get higher and it wasn't going to get lower than that, it was stable for several decades. If they could see that, they would properly allocate their resources and their energies into producing here and being here. But when they start seeing, well, it might change, so I've got to go and have something else set up where it's not going to affect my family's wealth. A lot of these people have estates that they've had passed on from their family, and so on and so forth. It keeps going down the line. So a lot of these people will move their assets via some corporate law and loophole, move their assets to a different country, and retain their family's wealth by not losing it to 94% tax rates in the United States like it was in 44 when it reached its all-time high. I mean, for many of those years, for probably a good 25-30% of the last century, those taxes for the rich were around 90%. They peaked out at 94%, but they were somewhere in a 10% range of mid 80s to mid 90s for about I'd say 30 years or maybe a little bit less. And you can check that out at the taxfoundation.org, or I'm sorry, it's just taxfoundation.org. I'll show you this. So you don't have to take my word for it. You can see a whole list of the years and the tax rate increases, and my research shows that right now the rich are paying like 35% of their income in taxes, at least their income tax, not including capital gains taxes, which are still increasingly high compared to other countries in the United States. But what I'm saying is, in 1931, taxes for the lowest class was 1.5% for up to $4,000, and up to 25%, and no more for anything over 100K. That was the top. So nobody was going to be paying any more than 25% on their income tax, period, no matter how much they made, period. And the lowest class were seeing income taxes at only 1.5%. In 1944, this gradually increased and reached an all-time high of 23% for up to 25K. The mid-range was 37% for over 101,991, and the top tax rate, with some in between these, was 94% for anything over $2.5 million. Now, I know it sounds unrealistic that people make $2.5 million. However, there are a lot of people that, not a lot, but comparatively, there are a lot of people in America who do make over that much. Some of them have, family money. Some are self-made. So on. They marry into money, whatever. And those people are probably big job creators. They probably, especially the ones that are self-made, that aren't just people with family money. But most of those people with family money have invested and are not stupid. They've put their money somewhere, and they're making money to fund future generations and pass on their wealth. So I would suspect that most of the people that make over this amount of money are creating jobs, possibly many jobs. And if their income tax and capital gains taxes go up significantly, like we've seen in 1944, equals 94% for these top people, where it's impossible for them to make anything. 6% isn't shit. I wouldn't work for 6% of my income. I don't care how much or how little I was making. Someone was going to be like, hey, you give me 94%, you keep 6%. I would say, no way, I'm out of here, I'm done. So, anyway, that's the big thing right there, is these high tax rates. Now, the lowest earners, I think they pay 10% of their earnings, which is pretty comparable and low in the last 60 years. I mean, this is one of the lowest that we've seen since 1931. And that's up to 8,500, if I remember right. And then the highest tax bracket is 35% for over 349K and some change. I don't know what the change is. But this has gone up and down and up and down You know, and even though it's not as high as 94%, that's still a lot of money, especially when you know that, and this is something that I've recently researched. Sorry, I'm on the wrong, oh yeah, right here. Oh, okay, yeah, the wealthiest pay, the wealthiest 1% earn 19% of the total income in the United States. That same 1% pay 37% of the income tax in the United States, total collected. That's how much they pay. So I'm sorry, I'm glad I went to this, because this is research that I found, and this is accurate information. You can look this up. I've got a couple of research sources here. It's actually, you're going to find it in this video. I've got it in one of these links here. So the top 1% of the income earners pay 37% of the total income tax in the United States. The top 10% of the income earners pay 68% of the tax burden, and the majority of the population that earn below the median income of around, and I don't quote me, I think it's around $50,000, earned 13% of the total income in the country, but they only paid 3% of the tax burden. So, you know, when the rich say to themselves, okay, here we are paying more than everybody, you know, and we're, you know, paying the most percentage, even though we're the biggest contributors, and, you know, the rest of the people that are, you know, the 50% or less are paying only 3% of the total tax burden, and they want to tax them more. That's what these people are demonstrating about. I see in the streets demonstrating, tax the rich more, tax the rich more. Well, if they have the option with these trade agreements like SAFTA or NAFTA, what's going to keep them here if we increase their tax burden again to 50% or 60%, or like in 1944 to 94%? You know, what's going to keep them feeling safe and stable in our country if they can't count on a good tax rate? You know, when so many other countries give a better tax rate, and they can get dual citizenship in some of these countries, so they can even keep assets there and avoid capital gains taxes. So I just think that it's kind of ridiculous to tax the rich more. We need to work as a community. We need to get along together as a community, and we got to realize that the rich people are a part of that. It's not us and them. We're Americans. We got to stick together. We got to support the rich people as well as the poor people. And we got to work together as a community. We don't need a big federation, a federal government, to do that for us, you know, to watch out for us and make this law or that law that, you know, does this or that, that, you know, in the long run ends up pushing people out of our country who are important and who create jobs. You know, my dad's steel job that he worked, you know, when I was a kid, Geneva Steel, they took their situation to China, or to Canada, sorry. They took their steel production to Canada. So on and so forth, you know, jobs all over. Dell had like 60% of their people out in another country, you know, in India, China, wherever. They had all kinds of different call centers. I think they even had one in Ireland and stuff. What's to keep these rich people safe and secure, feeling like they want to be a part of our community and they want to create jobs? You know, everybody complains at one point that, okay, we need the rich to pay even more, even though, you know, we're only paying 3%, you know, and I'm part of that too. That contributes 3% of the total tax burden, and the rich are paying, you know, 68%. The top 10% of the earners pay 68%, and we want them to pay even more than that, you know. And then what happens with it? We go to war with it. You know, these rich people aren't seeing the benefits. They're seeing, well, not all of them. I mean, some of them, like the weapons producers and, you know, machine producers and things that are going over to Iraq and all these other foreign countries. I mean, yeah, they're making money, but a lot of these rich people aren't seeing the benefit. They're paying all these high taxes, and then their money is going over to other countries for war or for peacekeeping or for policing the world and so on and so forth. So I think we need to make it not only acceptable to do business here, but encouraging to do business here. And, you know, sure, we should have a fair tax. That's what I propose, is a tax that's fair, like the consumption tax. And if people don't want to pay taxes, they don't need to consume. They can go agrarian and grow their own food and build their own houses and do their own thing without playing a part in this corporate, you know, society. And that's possible. You don't have to pay taxes under a fair tax if you can suffice for your own needs. And then if you do have to pay a tax, you're not paying any more than anybody else. The rich pays, you know, say 30% on their $50 million mansion. Well, I pay 30% on buying a brand new guitar. It's the same, 30% for this, 30% for that. But just think, 30% of $50 million is a hell of a lot more than 30% of a $500 guitar. That's how we have to look at it, in my opinion. So, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to defend the rich like I've seen people say on this video. I'm not trying to go out of my way for them. Hell, I'm in bankruptcy and I've never made over $100,000 in 1 year of my life. I'm not a rich person. I'm about middle ground. If I look on the tax bracket, I'm about middle ground. And, and I think that it's fine, that I'm paying taxes, but I don't want to pay more taxes than anybody else. That's not fair. That's why I believe in a consumption tax. Not the, the 999. I don't believe in the 999. I just believe that all consumables are taxed. And if you don't want to pay taxes, if you want to protest, then you don't buy things. You're not forced to pay just by being ambitious and earning an income and going to work. That shouldn't be discouraged. That labor, that part of our lives is given at our birth naturally to every man, woman, and child throughout the world. Our ability to labor. If we're blessed and we're not, handicapped, we're blessed, and that's no different than any other man, woman, or child in the common world as we know it. Everybody can work. Just about, like I say, except for those few who are born handicapped, and even they work. I've seen Stephen Hawking, who is quadriplegic, and he is an amazing, mathematician, astronomer, thinker, philosopher, whatever, and he's totally handicapped. So, we shouldn't be discouraged to work. If money is our driving factor, if taking care of our family or our distant relatives or our extended family's family, if that's our goal, we shouldn't be discouraged from doing it. Or whatever. Or if we want to build a well in Guatemala for a village that doesn't have fresh water, we shouldn't be discouraged from trying to earn for whatever our motivation is. We should be encouraged to work hard and compete. That's a good thing for our free market and our infrastructure and our economy and our progress, our inventions, our desire to improve life as we know it. Discouraging people from working is not the way to go. Discouraging people from consuming and wasting and burning gas all over the place and, toxifying the air and the ground and dumping this and dumping that. We should be discouraged. If we're going to be discouraged from anything, we should be discouraged from consuming, not from earning and being ambitious and being competitive. I think that our country has it backwards. We're penalized for being ambitious, and we're rewarded for consuming. We see, we'll give you a tax credit for buying a new car. We'll give you a tax credit for upgrading your heater, this and that. We'll give you a tax credit for, but there's still more consumption. There's still more trash in our, landfills when people consume more. And we're a consumer-based society, so we're always encouraged to consume. More money on your tax returns. Go buy stuff, consumer spending. We're encouraged to pollute and consume, but we're not encouraged to save and conserve and earn and be ambitious. And I think our country has it backwards. I think we should be rewarded for being ambitious and productive and progressive and innovative and, and whatever, but we should be discouraged from being sloppy and wasteful and consuming and all that. That's my opinion. Anyway, take it or leave it. I don't expect everybody's going to agree with me, but that's how I see it. I get in this conversation with just about half the people I know on Facebook, which is quite a few, and family members and so on and so forth. And I'm opinionated. I'm not trying to piss anybody off. I'm just opinionated. Look at the description of this video on YouTube or on whatever blog post you're seeing this at. If you check out the description, I'll give you the links to my research. And you can see where the taxes got high, the rich started getting nervous, and then they started leaving after it fluctuated a lot and was unstable and high and costly and ineffective for them to do business. The more ineffective we have made it for businesses to do business, the more they have left. Not just taxes, but other burdens, and the more our jobs have left and the more people have been in poverty. So anyway, that's my take on it. Peace.